We could bring the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Don on? Earlier. You need a microphone into there. You know. Oh, okay. Okay. Barr,
Here.
Giovanini,
Here.
Eckhoff. Here. Callis.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Hicks.
Here.
Bradshaw. Here. Clark. Here. Gaber.
Here.
Willie.
Here.
Sounded like he was behind the door.
Thank you. The consent agenda has 3 items on it. Had a chance to preview that.
I motion to accept the consent agenda.
Motion by Jamie, seconded by Mike Barr.
Let's get this
Roll
over.
call, please.
Barr,
Yes.
Giovanini,
Yes.
Eckhoff. Yes. Callis.
Yes.
Lee.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Bradshaw.
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
Gaber.
Yes.
Willie.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to the regular agenda, we have a presentation on solar farm outside of the city.
Yeah, and this one, Mr. Uphoff and I spoke in competitive power in an effort to let the neighbors know what was kind of going on in that area. Asked if they could come today, so I'll let Seth introduce his team.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I know a lot of the faces in here, and some of you I've known since I was a little guy, and some of you I got to know along the way. Good to be back here this evening. And as Mr. Wolford, I keep wanting to call him Chief, but as Mr. Wolford stated, I'm here assisting Competitive Power Ventures. So Competitive Power Ventures is a company that is developing a solar project here in Livingston County. It's going to be located up near Cugie. And so they wanted to come and present some information. Competitive Power Ventures is a company that develops and then continues to operate power plant facilities. So they do different types of power plant facilities across the country, and they'll tell you some of that as we go through this. But they are owners and operators. So they want to come in and they want to be good neighbors. They want to be partners with the local community. It's important for them to be able to tie into the community because they plan on being here for decades operating the power plant once they get it up and going. And so I'm going to introduce to you tonight, first is Micah Fox. Micah is with Competitive Power Ventures. And then also here this evening is Steve Sullivan. And Steve is with Power Communications, and the two of them are working together in terms of putting together the information and the presentation. And the idea is to come and speak to you because you're important decision makers in this community. And this project is going to be located out in the county, but there's still going to be a lot of benefits for the city of Pontiac, and it's going to be important for the city of Pontiac to have buy-in and to understand what's going on. And so these gentlemen tonight want to provide as much information as they can so that you can be knowledgeable on the topic. You're going to have constituents that may reach out to you and want to know more about it. So we're going to try to get you as much information as we can. But then we're also going to provide you, with this opportunity to ask some questions, or at least you'll be familiar with who we are so that if you get questions later on, you develop questions, you can reach out and we can do our best to answer them for you. So with that, I'm going to bring Mr. Fox back up here. He's going to go through the presentation for you this evening. And then at the end, at least up to the mayor's prerogative, we'll be happy to answer any questions, or we'll be sticking around and you can talk to us afterwards. Fair enough? All right. Thank you. This is Mike Fox.
Guys, so thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time, giving us the opportunity to speak to you a bit about the project and the farm here. The first couple slides really focus on the company, provide a little bit of background, so we can go to the next slide. A bit of background on myself. I'm originally from Illinois, from Mahomet. I'm based in Chicago now. The company has been around for over 20 years. It's has historically been focused on both, as Seth mentioned, developing the projects, but also owning and operating. So we'll be the main point of contact for the project through the life of the project. The company has developed a mix of solar, natural gas powered power plants, and wind farms across the country. The closest is actually a natural gas power plant that's under construction right now in Grundy County, so not too far from here. The next slide shows an overview of the projects that the company has developed and built over the last 20 years, over 5 gigawatts. This project specifically is about 300 megawatts. Go into details of what all that actually means. But as shown here, it's a pretty geographically diverse portfolio of projects that have been developed and shows kind of the depth of expertise that the company really brings to this type of work. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the project. Basically, it's about 2,000 acres, up to 2,000 acres of land near about halfway between Pontiac and Odell and near the Wolf Creek Golf Course. The project is a $400 million investment. It would largely be solar panels. It's very similar to community solar projects, which have been starting to come into the area here, just scaled up, but very similar technology. The footprint would look almost identical. The start of construction for this would be 2025, and then operation would start in at the end of 26. This is a key slide really for us, and one of the reasons we're excited for having this project here in Livingston County. It would bring 250 jobs to the community during the construction phase of the project. It would generate tax revenue of, in year one would be $2 million, and that's split largely between the schools, the Odell School District, Elementary School District, and the Pontiac High. So there's a direct benefit to the high school here in the city. The amount for Pontiac High specifically is in year one would be $600,000, and over the life of the project, it totals up to about $50 million of tax revenue that's generated for the county. That also benefits the emergency response teams, and we've been meeting with the emergency response teams, and would be providing training for those crews as the project gets closer to construction as well. It provides clean power for up to 75 or over 75,000 homes. So that's what the output of the project would be in this case. And then really what the reason for the need for the project is it's replacing a lot of old coal plants that are being retired in the area. And so as those start to roll off, the renewable energy starts to roll onto the grid and basically gets delivered directly here to the community. The slide here shows the first couple pictures really are shots from the site. So you can see from the site the wind farm that's just to the east of this. And basically we're situated between the wind farm and the golf course there, just outside of Cugie. And then the bottom couple pictures here show examples of similar solar projects, but it would look almost identical to this. The pausing here, the impact to the soil basically is that we're driving posts. The foundations for these really are just driven posts, like fence posts, about every 20 feet in either direction. So at the end of the project, it all gets pulled out, goes back to original farming condition. The life of the project would be about 35 to 40 years, and the decommissioning is regulated by the state. We basically have to have contract with the ag department that governs everything from soil compaction to decommissioning and how the project is maintained throughout the life of the project. So at the end of the project, it all goes back to farming condition, and the soil itself would be in rejuvenated state because the cover crop and because there's less work of the soil through farming activities. So it essentially acts like a land bank, goes back to farming condition at the end of the project, and in the meantime generates revenue and clean power for the community. So you can go to the next slide. This is just showing some of the work that we've been doing here in the community, trying to educate folks in the community about what the project is and isn't. Because we recognize that it's new technology, there's a lot of questions around it. This is an open house we hosted recently, or back in November, and we're continuing to do this. Our next hearing will be in April with the county, and so in the meantime, we'd like to meet with everyone that we can to answer any questions that folks might have and to provide any info we can on specifics of the project. There's a website, and we'll be reaching out to folks throughout the community as well about specifics here. But questions come up after the fact, please do reach out to us. We'll have some contact info at the end of this. We can go to the next slide. This is an overview of the landscaping. Basically, the picture here shows the golf course and how it wraps around the golf course, but we'll be adding in landscaping, screening around the residential properties, setting back the project from residential properties, above and beyond the county requirements and state requirements for that. The screening kind of shows what it would look like at the beginning, and then as the trees fill in, there would be basically a wall of trees around the residential community on the south side there that provides screening, and then we would pull it back, and we've been working with the neighbors as well in that area. But I can also answer more questions about this after if anyone has any. So next slide. For we've been working with a conservation consultant to pick basically a seed mix that would work well for the ground cover. This shows the added benefits that would come from the seed mix that's picked both in the array area and then also from we'd have buffer areas in certain portions of the project where it's open, but it wouldn't be used for the array itself. And those would provide added benefits to the project, to the soil, and to pollinators in the area. Next slide, please. We talk a bit about property values. I think we can go to the next slide, but basically we have supporting evidence showing that, if anything, it can add value to local property. We have a few health and safety questions that often come up. We'll come back to these at the end if there are questions. But generally, there's no safety risks to the community. The materials that go into this are all very benign, and there's quite a bit of evidence around that as well. Next slide, please. This is a key point, really talking about how ag land can be used beneficially both for solar and then return to production at the end of life. We often get questions about how much land could be enrolled into solar, and for context, the Illinois' renewable portfolio standard is if we took all the ag land in the state and looked at how much would be required to translate, basically how much solar would be required to meet that standard, it would require about 0.25% of the total ag land that's available to hit the targets that the state has outlined. So it's definitely a real amount of farmland, but small in comparison to the resources that are available. We can go to the next slide here. This talks a bit about the agreement that I mentioned with the state. It really does regulate and to provide protection for both the property, the surrounding community, and then the way that the condition of the property at the end of the project. So it does get returned to farming condition. If anything, the quality of the soil is improved, and the water resources are also maintained throughout the life of the project for the surrounding farmers and community. Next slide, please. These are a few references we have from past projects that we've done. We're also working, we can provide references if folks have questions. Based on our experience in Grundy County, I think we've had a very positive relationship with the county there, based on both during the initial development phase and then also during the construction phase of the project. So I think that covers most of the points that we wanted to cover. With that, I can open it up to questions if folks have questions, or if that's appropriate.
The tax revenue that you speak of, is
Yep.
it because it's a tax on the distribution of the electricity, or where is it? It's not property tax.
It is
Or is it?
effectively property tax. The state basically standardized this about 4 years ago when they had the first round of the community solar projects. And it's taxed on a per megawatt basis. So if the project's 300 megawatts, then it scales, you basically spread that across the land that's used. It gets taxed as property tax. And so it uses the same split that the existing property would have to the different.
But the property owner is still going to be paying taxes as well, or no?
No, but we would cover the project covers all the property taxes for
Okay.
both the equipment and the land. Yeah, and it's a multiple of what's being paid now. It basically,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, replaces the existing property tax and scales
Yeah.
up from there.
On the community benefits, you mentioned the benefits to Odell Grade School, Pontiac High School. What about Pontiac Grade School District?
Just because of the territory, it has a small piece of the project that's in that, and so there would be some to that, but I don't have the numbers on. I can definitely share those after. So there would be some benefit to it, but it's not as large as it would be for the rest of the other two school districts.
I have two questions. On this page with the map, in green, it says the historical renewable projects. Is that places where you had projects and they're not there anymore?
Basically, the company was acquired a couple of years ago by a new owner, and so the previous owner has the other assets. So
Okay.
we still operate a large majority of the projects that were developed. So we're still involved in I would say almost all those projects. But that's why it's called out that way on
So
the
they're still
map.
there, but with a different.
Yeah, a different owner financially, but we're still heavily involved in the operation and maintenance of those projects.
And then my second question is, you were talking about the life of the project. At the end of it, why would you leave? Why not? What makes you go away? I mean, why would you leave at the end of the life?
Yeah, it is a good question. The short answer is the lease is a 35 to 40-year lease. If the economics make sense, my guess is that the life of the project could be extended and
Okay.
continue. The panels themselves are warranted for 20 years, and typically the operating life of them is another 20 years. But a lot of the cost of the project really is in the upfront development and the rest of the equipment as well. So there's definitely value to continue operating if the economics make sense.
Any other questions for Micah or the team?
What was the actual time frame?
2025 to start construction, and largely just due to the utility permit timeline around that. And 26.
But you haven't gone before the county yet?
We started the process and then the zoning.
Yeah, so just to highlight a few of the things, as he just stated, April 6th is when we go in front of the ZBA, and then most likely the following month, it would go in front of the county board for full consideration after the ZBA's had it. Some of those things can change depending on how the meetings go, but most likely that would be the path that it's going to take. So again, just to highlight a couple of the things that we think are most important for Pontiac as the city is obviously there's a large potential influx for tax money to the local schools. So obviously Odell is its own district, but as you all know, it feeds into your high school. And so the betterment of those students is going to improve your high school if they're coming in more well prepared, if they have more resources available to them. And obviously for a school district like Odell, that's a very large influx of money. And the amount of money coming into Pontiac High School is not a small amount either. And so there's obviously a lot that could be used to benefit the school, offset other costs, or to be used for special projects to improve the school generally. So we think that really provides a really strong incentive for the community. And there is a small portion, Mr. Willie, as we talked about, for 429, but that district only catches a real small corner of the project. Additionally, there's going to be some additional tax dollars that when they get broken down could end up, as he was stating, with the emergency services, so with fire department, police department. But also there will be training, even if they're not getting a lot of tax dollars per year. The company wants to make sure that they're providing training because obviously Pontiac is one of the main backups to the rural fire district there and to back up the sheriff's department for anything that's going on out there. So making sure that Pontiac is trained and prepared to assist with anything out there is something that's very important to CPV and the project going forward. So we hope that you will find this project as something that would be a great benefit to the city. There will be also an influx of work and tax revenue from people coming in during construction. That'll be 18 months to 2 years, so you get that little boost along the way as well. But we're hopeful that you'll see the benefits that this project can provide, talk to your constituents about it, be willing to forward them to us if they've got any questions. We're hopeful that we can be partners with the city of Pontiac as this moves forward. And if you're supportive of it, that you would also reach out to the county board members who are in your districts and let them know that this seems like a project that you want to get behind or that you think would be important for Pontiac generally. So those are the things that we think are important, and we'd ask for your support to that extent. And again, if there are any other questions, we'll be available. So with that, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the presentation, and you're like you're well on your way to success. So all right. Moving along to item B on our agenda, the annual police pension fund report.
Yes, so this one is number 2 on the list, so everybody gets to, in the audience, gets to listen to this fantastic information. So as you know, the police pension fund is governed in the state constitution, so we don't really have any control over how it's run. And if you recall, last year, the fund was consolidated throughout the entire state. The downstate pension fund was moved over to one big state fund with each municipality's piece in it being part of the investment aspect of it, but still its fund. The market value of our assets at 3/31 of 21 were 11.27 million. At the end of 3/31 of 22, 11,487. So not a gigantic gain, but we did not have a gigantic investment year either. But if you look at the income from 2021, the income was 2.8. This year it was 1.1 million. The weighted investment return was 1.2%, but the state estimates that the actuarial return will be 6.5, so that fell well short of that. And the actual investment return from the previous year, as you can see, was a very good year at 23.1%. As we look over on the next page of the expenses, what I think you'll really notice from that, actually going all the way down, the fund is 61% funded, and in the very last part of this report, the levy recommendation from the state of Illinois, last year from the first page was 687,410. Coming up for the next year, if you remember, even from the levy, is 688,180. So it was just a small increase, and I think that's due to the 22% return, and next year, we're going to see a pretty significant increase on that, so.
Unless the market comes back
Unless
in the next month and a half. Good luck.
Right. Yeah, so,
Happening.
all in all, last year, a good year for the pension fund. So, that's good news for us in the coming year, and hopefully we will avoid any long-term financial problems that some have suggested may happen next year, and now maybe they're not going to be as severe. So in the end, that's some material, and if you have any questions about it, I can do my best. Like I said, the state runs all of the fund investments now.
But they did not in this report?
In this report,
This-
they did.
this is the
yes.
first
Yeah,
year of that.
Yes.
Okay.
The fire pension started a little bit later than the police one did, but the police one was consolidated a little earlier.
Confidence is high. This will come together in an orderly manner. So, yeah. Any questions for Jim on this? If not, we're gonna move on to, annexation zoning ordinance, 2023-001. Alan, you wanna give us an insight?
We can do that. The ordinance in front of you, 2023-0001, was prepared after council determination that it was appropriate to annex portions of Countryside Lane and Westview Drive that were previously not part of the city of Pontiac, but became wholly surrounded by a couple of prior annexations. And the law says if there's a tract under 60 acres that's wholly surrounded by a corporate entity like the city of Pontiac, the city has the right to annex that property. This has been surrounded for a lot of years, and one of the issues, that was important to certain council members was that services be available and provided, like Westview Drive did not have access to a public sewer, but a year ago, the city made the effort and incurred the expense to install sewer, so all those properties now have access to a public sewer. And that, I think, triggered the council's decision that now the municipal benefits are available to these properties, and that this is the time to do the annexation. So procedurally, what happened was, we've got an annexation plat that's attached to the ordinance that shows the properties in question. All of the property owners were mailed a certified letter telling them that this was in process and notifying them that the council would be considering it tonight, and I assume that's why some of the people are here. And the same notice was also published in the Leader, I think it was maybe January 4th, and give public notice this was going on. All the properties that would be annexed will be in Ward 2 of the city, so all the property owners would vote in Ward 2. And the zoning under the statute is going to be an E1, one-family residential zoning district. That's our ordinance provides that absent some additional finding and a process through the planning board, the annexed properties come in as one-family residential which actually is suitable for all these uses. I think everything is one family. So if this ordinance is adopted, the next step is we have to provide notice of the adoption to the Postal Service, to the Livingston County Clerk, and to, just starting January 1, to the Illinois Department of Transportation, so they can keep records of who has jurisdiction over roads. When the city annexes a property, the annexation extends to the far side of the road. So we also annex adjacent. Now, Westview Drive is actually, Countryside Lane, I think, is a actual city, county road or township road at this point. And Westview Drive is a private drive. Westview Drive is not a public road. So the city would not undertake any maintenance obligations for Westview Drive, but portions of Countryside Lane across the street from the properties being annexed, if they're not already part of the city, and they may be because of subdivision, the Trainer subdivision. They may already be in the city, I don't recall. But anyway, adopting this ordinance will be recorded along with all the proofs of the notices, and that will effectuate the annexation. The city zoning map would be amended. And commencing with 2023, properties would be taxed as part of the corporate, part of the city.
I make a motion to approve December 2023-0-002.
I have a couple questions.
Please.
So the road is a public road, or a private road. I mean, I've been asked by many is why, how does it become a public road? If we're annexing them and they don't get that service of us taking care of their road, I mean, is there any way, or is the
There
road
would be
part
a-
of their
There would be a
properties?
way to do that. The same discussion has happened at the condos, Crystal Court, Carroll Court, because those are also private.
Right,
And that if the adequate right-of-way was dedicated to the city, which is typically 60 foot of right-of-way, and the road was upgraded to meet city standards.
but
then
they would have to
typically-
upgrade it.
Then typically the city would accept a dedication of that.
Okay.
It can
Basically,
also
they would have to
theoretically be
organize
done
to
by
do
a
it.
special assessment process where the city would determine a road needs to be built if they could acquire the right-of-way. You remember how much trouble we had getting the sewer right-of-way.
Yep.
Had to buy basically, it came from the golf course. And that could be done with an assessment on all the property owners. City hasn't availed itself of that procedure for probably since the late 80s, or early 90s, and that was down on Bennett Street, I think. Water Street, Bennett Street, and Olive Street. Started doing this job. We haven't done any since.
Do they get garbage service? Because they all pay for their own garbage service now.
Really?
Yes.
I think that was the
Am I
They
correct
would-
there? You all pay for your own garbage service, right?
I'm assuming, I mean, I don't see any reason they're not eligible if the road's suitable to have garbage pickup on. You know, they would get a separate garbage bill, the ones, I don't know if anybody's actually connected to the sewer yet. Once they're connected to the sewer, the garbage bill comes with the sewer bill.
That was my next
But for the
question.
garbage service, they would just get a separate garbage bill.
Do we
for
do that?
municipal garbage. Do that.
Do we send separate garbage bills for
Yes.
non? Okay,
There's still a few places that.
yeah.
Yeah, that,
Yeah, it's
That
all made
happens
from the
down
same
in-
system, it would just
Yeah.
be without sewer.
it wouldn't be necessarily a choice if the garbage service is provided, everybody would have to, city garbage. Their private service.
Okay, those are my questions. Fine.
Any other questions? Yeah. We have a motion by Brian to
I
adopt,
second it.
and a second by John Willie. Roll call, please.
Giovanini,
Yes.
Eckhoff,
Yes,
Hallis,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Bradshaw,
Yes.
Clark,
Abstain.
Gaber,
Yes.
Willie,
Yes.
Barr.
Yes.
Thank you. Look forward to adding some services out there. Sounds like they're needed. Moving on, we're going to, another ordinance, 2023-0002. The Code of Ordinances referring to animals.
I can address this one also, Your Honor.
Please.
There have been requests, numerous requests over the past 2 to 3 years to allow small-scale backyard chicken coops, which are becoming more popular in urban type of areas, to allow people to have some private egg production. And until recently, the council has been reluctant to address that, but we had some nice ladies make a presentation to the city council meetings ago and provide quite a bit of background information, and I think council members were invited to an open house over in Genoa of a property where they have this type of facility. And I was directed to draw this ordinance, and I gave it my best shot, guys, based on the guidance that I was given. It incorporated most if not all of the provisions that proponents had suggested. The ordinance basically would require anybody wanting to have backyard chicken coop to get a permit from the city. And I've got a provision in here for a small charge if the council decides to do that. I left it blank. It could be done without charge theoretically, but there will be some work involved because we're going to have the building office, Dave Wilson, will probably do an inspection just to make sure any proposed chicken coop is set up professionally, an appropriate structure, and located as required in this more than 25 feet from the residence and with a 5-foot setback from the property line. And then the permit, part of the application process, anybody that's applying for this will need to, the permit application will include a consent for city people, city representatives to enter upon the property to inspect at any time, reasonable time. If we get complaints of odors and that sort of thing, we wouldn't have anybody saying you can't come on my property to inspect, because they would do that. And if a property's not owned by the person that's applying for it, that application process would include the owner having to sign a permit application to consent to it. So a tenant of renting a house could do this if it's approved by the city, but they would have to have the owner's consent. And then, of course, there's a lot of provisions in here. I think we have no more than 6 hens, and hens only if animal, chicken's improperly sexed and turns out to be a rooster, they have to move that out of town or take care of it somehow. These are supposed to be for egg production, so not supposed to be a slaughter of the chickens in town. The coops have to be made appropriate for this purpose. And if you go out to RP Home and Harvest, Farm and Harvest or whatever, you'll see the types of coops that they make for this. And nothing prevents somebody from building a similar coop, but it would have to be, meet Dave Wilson's inspection of being suitable for the purpose and give enough space. And the chickens have to have at least 4 square feet of space. Have to be at least 5 feet from the property lines, no closer than 25 feet neighboring residents, no free range or running at large of the chickens. The bedding waste, and if chicken becomes deceased, it needs to be disposed of properly so as not to create an odor problem or a health safety problem. This permit process would not override a subdivision restriction. So if you live in a platted subdivision that has a set of covenants and restrictions, and it says no livestock or animals of that nature, we can't issue a permit for it. But in the older parts of town that aren't that kind of subdivision, there are no restrictions. But I don't think in Fairway View we could probably.
I doubt it, but nobody would enforce it.
The permit, as part of the enforcement process, the city would have a right to revoke a permit after notice if the person didn't bring themselves into compliance, if there was a problem. The representation to the city that these were not problems presumes that the owner of the chickens is responsible. dogs and cats aren't problems if the owners are responsible. We get one of the most frequent tickets that I'm enforcing particularly the summer months, are dogs barking, disturbing neighbors around at large. And not that there's anything wrong with being a dog owner, it's a matter of people handling that responsibly. So if someone isn't taking care of the chickens appropriately and is not getting rid of the waste, they become an odor problem, that sort of thing, we can just pull the permit. Plus, violation of the ordinance would be subject to our normal fine process of $75 to $500, and each day would constitute a separate offense. So that's a summary of the provisions that would have to be adhered to, and if the ordinance is adopted, it would go into effect in 10 days. It would give the people that wanted to try this the opportunity to get their chick orders in for spring.
Thanks, Alan. Questions?
The fee. Does anybody have any thoughts on, we have to have a fee.
I think we have to have a fee. I think to express the seriousness, because it's just not frivolous. I don't think it needs to be excessive, but I also think it needs to send a message that this whole process is a serious process and needs to be attended to.
Normally, a fee that, when we try to set fees historically, we've looked at trying to recoup the cost of providing the service. So I'm assuming that the application process and initial inspection will be half an hour to an hour of Dave's time, and then the rest will depend on whether there's any problems or not. There will be some. I mean, there will undoubtedly be either someone that's not doing a good job maintaining their chicken coop, or somebody that happens to live next door to a neighbor that just doesn't like it and makes complaints. We have that happen too, where sometimes complaints are made, maybe with a minimal amount of, activity that precipitates. So that's going to require some follow-up either by the police department or.
Dave, looking at fees you have for other projects, would this paperwork probably be about on par with those other?
I didn't put it in, I kind of had in mind at least 25.
Yeah, at least.
You have, construction. Jason has.
There you go. Did you know a good welder or a good metal fabrication place, Frank?
No, I don't know if you.
At this stage in the game, it would primarily be some discretion with Dave, and then if the property owner was not pleased with that, they would probably, I'm gonna guess, come back to the city council and say, hey, they're not letting me do this. I think, by the way I would perceive it is, we know what the commercial ones look like, and if somebody made one that had met the size requirements and looked and acted very similar to what a commercial one would look at, we'd have no reason to object. Someone puts 4 or 5 5-gallon buckets, ties them together, somehow that's probably not gonna do the job.
As far as the fee goes, when I was looking at this and perusing other fees we have, I'm assuming $50 would be the minimum that we want to go with. And I think that's what we should put into the. Any thoughts on that?
I think it should probably be similar to what other fees.
Yeah. Comparable. But there'll be more initial work on this than any other thing. And quite frankly, flying, see how it goes.
We're gonna have people.
At the price of eggs right now, it's probably more attractive than, I think eggs are close to $8 for an 18 pack at Walmart. Very similar county market.
How much does it cost to feed chickens and
Oh,
maintain
it
chickens?
is, no, this has gotta be something someone has a passion for. Because it's like a lot of other hobby things, you're not gonna get ahead doing. Because chickens require a lot of care. And they are very fragile health-wise. Death loss is pretty common, both from varmints and from disease. And if they get them as chicks, there's the brooder requirements, you know, they eat the right kind of, stuff that works in the gizzards, you know, they have the stones or whatever. You've got to have that diet that allows them to process that. I'm not an expert on it, but I know I've had a lot of chickens, I know they're a lot of work.
Yeah, I was raised on a farm. We had chickens. It's a lot of work. I don't think they're gonna make money selling eggs in town. And
6 chickens.
yeah, and personally, it's still a farm animal, and from my point of view, I don't think farm animals should be in a residential area. If somebody in my neighborhood had a chicken and coop in their backyard, and the guy next door wanted one too, you know, just moving the chicken manure and everything else it has to be composted. There's always going to be a stench. I just don't see room for farm animals in the neighborhood. So I'll be objecting to this.
We have had animal issues. Animals are a fairly common issue in the community. Besides the dogs running at large and the barking, we have had people that had large quantities of non-farm animals, rabbits, foxes, wildlife almost, that did present issues, and we were able to resolve those through enforcement.
And I see the chickens
And we've had a lot of
attracting.
people ask about potbelly pigs too.
Yeah, I see
We've always,
chickens
they're
attracting
they're
that.
pigs, they're farm animals.
And then there's the other thought of, okay, so someone decides this is going to be a good hobby, and they put a chicken coop in their backyard, and then, you know, they don't take care of it. They run off to vacation. They don't have enough people to watch the chickens. They get frustrated with doing it, and then what happens to the chickens? Is the Humane Society going to take the chickens? They're not. They don't have the
The
capability to do
appropriate way
it,
would be to
so.
find a farm type of situation, but they
Which is why
might,
Mike
they
said
might
they're
end
farm
up,
animals.
they might end up
They're
being.
farm animals,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. They might end up being dinner. I don't know. Even though you're not supposed to slaughter them in town, so you don't offend the neighbors, I guess.
One thing Mike did not bring up, but Alan mentioned varmints, and they do attract varmints. I raised chickens as a kid too. I was raised on a farm, small farm. You get possums, you get coons, you get skunks. Yeah, so I mean, we already have skunks and possums and coons in town, and even foxes.
They love eggs
Horse-
like people.
Got 'em all in my
You know, but
backyard.
Careful.
I just see it as attracting even more of that, which I don't want coons and possums in my backyard.
They're already there.
I got them in my backyard.
Yeah, they're,
I agree,
It's just that-
but
it's just that
adding
little
more
bit
source to
right,
them is
yeah.
just going to attract more,
Yeah.
is my point.
Yeah.
You could say that about dogs. Every time you put out a
right, or feeding
dog's
the
going,
birds.
that attracts.
I
I've
probably,
I've got cats running through my neighborhood like it's,
Yeah, but a big golden retriever or a German shepherd is not gonna be prey for a possum.
I guess you could say that about feeding birds too. I probably put out 20 pounds. And I think mainly what I'm doing is feeding my cat. I have a problem with cats.
They eat the birds here,
They eat the birds.
Uh-huh.
I don't want my neighbor's cat in my yard.
I think it's a unique hobby, but I just don't think residential chicken owners are going to be equipped to handle all those other issues. And, you know, if we had to do something, if it was really a must, you know, maybe there'd be a central part of the city where they can have their coops. People can go there. I just don't see having them spread throughout the neighborhoods.
Are we expecting a burgeoning population of chickens? I guess it's becoming so commonplace in communities. I mean, that was part of our evidence that we had, that major cities are allowing these now.
I think that
And-
if it is difficult and it is something that is difficult, well, they have right to try and fail.
If we allow them to do that, I think we have to have some wording as to what happens with the coop. If the chickens go, the coop should go.
I think that's an appropriate addition. I could add that the coop has to be removed from the property if the person no longer maintains the permit of the chicken. That probably makes sense, because what'll happen is the chickens will go and the coop will sit in the backyard and fall apart.
And we have neighbors now that have stuff that's probably not as bad as a chicken coop, but we can stem something off initially here by putting it in the agreement. If we
That
choose.
can be added very easily, that when the chickens are gone, the coop has to be removed for 30 days or something. Then that would be subject to fine if they didn't. That would be a very easy thing to prove. A picture of a coop with no chickens in it, probably.
I would motion acceptance of the ordinance 2023-00002
With the
With the,
fine, with
with the, $50 fine, or
$50
application fee,
permit fee. Okay.
And the removal.
and the removal of the.
And I will
Sorry.
add, with the language to be added for the removal of the coops, I'll add that as another subsection. So we've got A through J now, we'll add a K, and put in the coop has to be.
I'd second that.
we have a motion by Kelly, second by Don Hicks. No more discussion. Roll call, please.
Eckhoff,
Yes.
Hallis,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Bradshaw,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Gaber,
No?
Willie,
No.
Barr,
No.
Giovanini.
Yes.
Dang, I was thinking it was gonna come in a tie and I give it
The next, ladies, the next step is, the chief and I will work on a short permit application so that it's available for people to come in and make. Right now, we just adopt the ordinance. We don't have a process. We need to get an application, and it's gonna be relatively short and sweet. Give everybody get a copy of this ordinance so they know the rules. Everybody will, who doesn't will agree to abide by the ordinance, agree to allow the city access, and that sort of thing. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, by mid-February, we'll be up where somebody could ask for a permit.
I'm curious, those that are gonna have these, have you talked to the neighbors? That would be a plus.
Well, step one is completed, so we'll go from there. Not a problem. Moving on, we have an appointment to the Police Pension Board, who I thought was on the Police Pension Board. I think it's more of a renewal.
Reappointment, right.
Reappointment.
Correct.
For Carol Peterson. And Carol, of course, is the city treasurer and has done an outstanding job on several of these programs. I think we just need a motion for
I'd say
Carol's
look.
reappointment. Motion by Bill, seconded by Jamie. Roll call, please.
Hallis,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Bradshaw,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Gaber,
Yes.
Willie,
Yes.
Barr,
Yes.
Giovanini,
Yes.
Eckhoff.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on, now it calls for mayor's comments. Earlier, I wrote congratulations on here. Unfortunately, I didn't finish the second line as to who, but I'd like to thank the city crews for doing a great job around town and cleaning up and keeping everything moving. I've been over to visit with the fire chief, and they've had a really busy last 2 months, the ambulance service and calls, and have been doing an outstanding job and really working well. I was gonna do a little check on Madison Street project, and I understand that's in good shape, but finding less work than we anticipated. So, sounds really good too. Other than that, there's a Greater Livingston County Economic Development thing tomorrow afternoon. I understand Congressman Hood will be make a small presentation there. Other than that, city council comments.
Where's that at? The,
Eagle.
I have, I have a question about the electric charging stations that are out in the parking lot. And maybe I don't have a lot of recall about when I know they came to us as a grant from the state, and basically the state paid for the machines, and we had to pay for the electrical, or maybe they paid for the electrical too, but I've had numerous people ask me why it's free, and I tend to agree with them. You don't put gas in my car, and we shouldn't be putting power in people's cars. The citizens should not be paying for that, because if I owned an EV, I could bring it up here and plug it in. And it's an expectation, I know, that it's here for visitors, but it doesn't have to be used by visitors. So I'm just curious of, if we were told we couldn't charge, what do we have to do to be able to charge? What's everybody else's thoughts? I mean, obviously, we can't have a discussion here because but, maybe we need to examine it further. And maybe it's not gonna cost us a lot of money, but it's costing us money.
I agree, we should be paying for it.
Maybe we should have all thought of these questions when we knew that we were getting it, and I never dreamed that it wasn't part of the program, that there was some kind of a
Yes,
fee
I
that you had
didn't
to
realize
plug
that
in.
we were paying.
I'm correct though, right? There's no, you just plug it in.
Correct.
You don't have to pay for anything, okay?
Kelly, you
That's
should have
correct.
kept quiet, bought an electric car and come up here at night.
All right.
So, anyway, I think we should investigate that.
Is it operational? I don't even,
One of them is, the other one is not yet. One of them is good for 2 vehicles. And, so I'm trying to think back, this started before me. Liz, do you remember, was part of the grant that it was a service that we would provide for for charging?
That was part of
That we cover the cost for charging?
For how long a period of time?
it wasn't part of the narrative. That was the idea.
Well, at this point, only one of them is actually functional, and I wasn't even sure that was true.
I've seen a car plugged into it, but
Into the
Yeah,
second one?
I've seen a couple, three.
yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you see it more frequently. I did a little bit of quick research, and it sounds like it's $10 to $30 is about what it costs to fill up your car.
It has to be there like 8 to 10 hours.
Yeah,
Well,
it's,
it all
level
depends
2.
on what kind of charging station it is. I don't know
I
those
think I
questions.
think they call those level 2s or something.
Okay.
They're not, they're 240, I think they're 240 and they charge fairly slowly. But I did the math on it one time with what the cost of Wally's. I figured it'd be about $30 maybe to charge.
Yeah.
But we need to pull out the grant paperwork again and see what the restrictions are. And make sure, that we don't have that kind of leeway. And it'd probably be fairly expensive to put the necessary hardware on those to collect charge cards and that sort.
Potentially, yeah.
It is able to. Sorry, not to interrupt.
No.
There is other equipment.
Is there any way of telling how much is used?
Yeah,
right
I'll
now?
have a report.
Okay, so you can see how much power is being used, so we know we can cost it out and see what it's costing.
I guess we should all see where the residents are coming from, though. It's really not our job to provide people their means of driving their car around.
I've seen one vehicle that I assumed was plugged in up there. Past 3 weeks. And I wasn't sure if it was actually plugged in. So
Regularly, there's vehicles that are plugged in
Yeah,
there.
I've seen one plugged in.
There are some that I know for sure are local residents that are plugging in while they're at work.
The most convenient would be to plug in while you work,
Yeah.
because you've got
Yeah.
the time while you're at work to have the charge. Other than that, an hour or so passing through is not gonna do much
Then
to
you
you.
gotta, you gotta have an appointment.
There you go. Walk-
You have to bring
Get
your
out
own
there,
charge,
go to
you have to
work
bring your
every
own adapter if you have a Tesla.
Okay. Moving on, city administrator.
You just see at the back of your packets, there's a couple pieces of information on who's visited Pontiac in 2022. And I think that's just a nice testament to what we have to offer here in the city, that our total visitors were back up quite a bit. We hope and expect that to be even larger this year. And then the second is the Illinois Freedom Project, is a tourism project in cooperation with the library, and that looks to be a very interesting project as well. So great things are happening around the city, and the staff has been working hard to get those done. We're trying to fill some positions that have become vacated, and that seems to be going pretty well too. So all in all, I think as we're heading in and we're getting ready to start prepping for the next budget year, things are looking pretty good right now. Things are looking pretty good right now.
Thanks, Jim. Public comments. Would you
If
want
I-
to step up? Okay. Well,
So we have, and I'm sorry, for public comments, we're streaming live, and if you're not at the podium, people won't be able to
So
hear you.
this is
Sorry,
for
can I have
West,
your name, please?
Lane Hinkle.
Okay.
This is for Westview Drive. For the trash, when is that gonna start? You guys, so that our taxes are gonna be paying for the trash service?
No, your taxes don't pay for the cash, there's an extra charge for that.
Okay, so
Just
when
like you
is,
have
we're all gonna have one company, is that correct?
It's
Yes, it'll
When
be.
is that gonna
contract
start?
with American Disposal. And technically, we gotta coordinate it, cause I don't know what your contracts are, whether you pay by the month or whether it ends up.
I think it's
like
3
Janu-
month.
So if the end of January, it seems like it might be convenient, try to start at the 1st of February. We need to check and communicate that somehow. We need to check with our representative of the proposal and be able to do that. And then you'll have to be given the containers, the totes, you know. Those totes, there's a recycling tote and there's a garbage tote. Garbage is weekly, recycling is every other week, and on the city website, it tells you which is which, you know, and they usually on time. I think Christmas and major holidays, they may run a day behind after the holiday. I don't know if yesterday, whether that's gonna be a behind week or not, so.
No.
So bottom line is, I'm Wednesday, I guess I better get it out. But I think that would be appropriate timing, and it's incumbent on us to get a hold of our provider and to make sure that they understand this is added to the map, and then to make sure they get you your totes. And I don't know what the time frame for that is.
So are you guys are we gonna be able to set out sticks and yard waste, or?
The yard waste, they typically, you'd be subject to those services too. With the yard waste, we pick up brush, leaves, Chris can fill in that. We don't do large collection items very often. We have one a week or something, maybe one pickup. They don't service all on private roads.
With the trash, you can set out one large item.
Okay, so no yard debris?
Not with the trash. The trash is through a company
Yep.
outside the city. But the yard debris, that's the city of Pontiac.
I think we would need permission to access the private road first.
Well,
Perhaps,
Our equipment is heavy,
oh, that's why I said early on, if the road was capable of handling it.
there's certain considerations.
We don't want them firefighting.
perhaps we need to draft some form of a letter to all the residents that are gonna be affected there, and what services we're gonna
Yep.
provide, and when we would begin, and what the procedures are gonna be, because.
Because that honestly
These are all
was
good
not part of
questions.
the discussion previously.
Right,
Probably should have been, but it wasn't, so.
yeah.
So after we get together with the providers, then we will get out a criteria and time frame for you.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Hinkle, the sewer
Yes.
is active right now.
Come to the podium.
Hi, I'm Dee Hathaway. I'm on Westview as well. And I had a question about the sewer project. We've had no communication on the sewer project since last year before they started digging. I have a pool in my backyard that wasn't graded properly, and I don't know whether to fix it or what the next steps or the dates are for the next steps. Why waste my time unless I know what the project is?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's back there, but we don't, I have not been told anything. How do we tie into it? What is the $5,000 for? What's the timeline? We know nothing.
You didn't receive a registered letter?
No, the only one we got is for the annexation. That we got the,
I haven't sent a letter on that, but where the city is not, there was communication when the ordinance was adopted to do the tap-on fee, and that's recorded public document.
that was,
But
yeah.
the city has not made it in the ordinance a requirement for people to connect. As long as if your sanitary system, your septic system's working properly,
Right,
city made a specific election. We could have required it because of the proximity,
right.
but to let people hook up as they needed it. Now, the county, if your septic system fails, the county won't give you a permit to fix it because the sewer's there.
But
And
we
the
had to
tap-on-
send a letter back saying if we wanted to tie in or not, and we did, but we have gotten no communication back. We sent that back last summer.
I think it'd be appropriate to send everybody an official letter telling them the sewer, reminding them what the rules are for connecting and the tap-on fee, just to communicate.
Yeah, because that's
There was-
mentioned the
we-
$5,000, but
Yeah,
it's,
that's,
we've
what
heard
that
nothing
does,
more.
that tap-on fee helps recoup part of the cost of constructing the sewer. It's a fractional part, it's not anywhere close to the whole cost. That's what the tap-on fee for is, to cover part of it. And again, it only is payable when you connect. Now, if you sell your house and that tap-on fee shows up, your attorneys of the buyer and seller are gonna have to talk a little bit about how that's gonna be covered, because it is a lien on the property, but it doesn't cause a balance due until you have to connect. So that has led to some, discussions during real estate transactions.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard of any of this, so.
And there was at least one real estate transaction that I was involved with during the process of pre-construction after it was committed, that the property owner that was selling actually gave a partial credit to the buyer for some of that connection charge to help offset that. It was negotiated during the deal, but it was known at the time that it was going to happen. So
Okay,
in fairness to the property owners, it is appropriate to send out some form of communication that the thing is functional, and anybody that wants to connect, you have to pay the cost of getting a plumber to do the connection, has to be a licensed plumber, and pay the connection fee. That happens through Mr. Wilson's office up here at City Hall.
Mr. Wilson?
He's next door, go in the door immediately west of this
Okay,
and take a right turn, and that's the building and zoning office.
okay. And then as far as the damage to our yard, they didn't grade it well at
No.
all. Is there any way to
Brian,
recoup the fees for
You know,
that?
which house are you? What's your
We're
address?
204,
204.
Southwest View. And we've got it's gonna hold water. Once it starts raining, we're gonna hold water.
You haven't had any rain this week, huh?
To be honest, I haven't walked out there.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Most of the,
I did
my observation, most of the impact was on the third hole of the golf course, but
That's where we're at.
yeah, I know everybody along there's on the third
Everybody's
hole of the
on.
golf course, but is it in your yard or on the city side?
No, it's in our
In your
yard.
yard, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't there before the work was done, so maybe somehow or another they got over in the yard. Maybe Brian could take a look at it.
The only thing that would be near the yard would be service tap on, if we extend it up to the property line. In those areas. Might have been
That only went up to the property line, so.
Take a look at it.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, we
Honestly.
appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Sometimes,
A lot of
you
work
know,
needs to be done.
sometimes we don't get the memo.
I lived along there, I wouldn't be happy with the way things have been left.
Yeah, we haven't had any communication since that initial letter from Kincaid. Actually, Mr. Mayor is the only one that actually responded and returned phone calls, so God bless you for returning my phone.
Not a problem.
Communication's a little bit lacking, that's why
Okay.
I'm here. Thank you.
All
You
right.
can send out more information.
We will be doing that. I think we have one more guy. Yeah.
I'm Mr. Keenis. I have property on Westview, 2 lots. First of all, I want to say I think you guys are doing a marvelous job on the golf course. I had concerns when the Elks was going to close that or sell it, who the new owners would be, and you have done, in my estimation, I speak only for myself tonight, I think the golf course is in great shape. Park Recreation deserves a lot of credit, but I like how that's been handled. One of the things I want to bring up is I noticed when you put the sewer line in, you also broke open the curb on 116, and it looks like it gives you access to the yard. Is there a chance you're going to put a road in there? That would be my concern. That I think you're landlocked, is what I think. I don't know how you have access to the golf course other than going on other people's property. So you're landlocked, and I'm thinking, well, maybe you're going to put a road in there, and I'm not sure what that would do to our backyards. That's my first concern. You don't have to answer it, just for consideration. The second thing is on septic tanks. I guess mine is fine. I'm guessing that, well, my understanding is that they can remain. I cannot replace, but I could repair. Do I have that correct?
I think you're correct on that.
I
If
can-
you
I-
require, if your work requires a county health department permit, they're not going to permit it to happen. If
Okay.
work that can be done like pumping a septic tank or maybe a broken tile that didn't require a permit, I think that can be done.
So okay.
But
So-
once it gets to the level of your contractor saying we have to go get Donnie Simmons to give
I
us
hear
a
you.
county permit, then he's gonna say, no permit, you need to hook up to the sewer.
So like minor work and stuff like that, I can deal with the septic tank people.
So if you had to put in a new leach field, for
Yeah.
instance, I think that would be more than repair, that would be
Okay.
construction.
Um,
Like
So
your
those are my-
vacant lot,
I'm
the
sorry,
next owner would, you have the vacant lot at the end, right?
I can't hear you.
Is the vacant lot at the end yours, Bob?
Mine is right there by end of hole of 5.
Right.
And basically, the car going past the end of 5 to the new addition down 6. Like that's where my property is, that you're using my property, which is fine, but just that you're doing that. So I'm trying to think like where, I think you're landlocked unless I don't understand the plot system as well as maybe you do. I think right now you're using Pano's property with her permission, of course, but the bottom line is I'm not sure how. So that was making me wonder whether a road was your answer to that, which also would be kind of unbecoming to our property. So you guys can go and talk about that on your own. Then the other thing I want to say is, in terms of negotiation, is there any way that I know you have the power to take over the land without any ifs, ands, or buts, but you know, when other people come in like businesses, you give them some kind of a gratuity. It could be free water, whatever. Is there any way that your gratuity for us landowners who are now going to give you a massive taxes, is there a way you could defer that till 24?
You're saying the tax? The property tax?
Yeah.
So,
Are you going to charge us? You're not going to charge the property tax?
Well,
it won't be this tax.
Yeah, Bob, we consciously, I mean, it was a conscious decision on the part of the city to pass this ordinance in January rather than December. If it had been passed in December before the filing of the tax levy on December 27th, your tax bill this summer would have had the city on. you got a year's grace. It's a
Okay.
gratuity.
Yes.
So, well, then I'm up
And
here.
the
Thank you
council
for
made that decision when we scheduled this.
Then I'm up here thanking you for what you did for us. Thanks. And I hope you're as good as property owners of the elk.
No, we enjoy seeing you out in your yard when we're golfing, Bob.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Looks like Keith Tribbley has a comment to make.
I was just gonna reiterate what Dee said about the property. They didn't return the property to, to what it was when, before they dug up, and they did come onto the yard. So they didn't just come up to the property line, they actually came into the yard. And there is a little bit of a swale on my property. It's not bad, but, it wasn't returned to what it should have been originally. So
Well,
that was my only,
That Brian
only
could take
thing.
an inspection of it and
Yeah, I mean, it's okay, but it wasn't.
check it all out.
Wasn't returned to what it should have been.
All right,
No, we appreciate that.
thank you.
It's a tough lie on the golf course, too.
All right. With no other business, we would have a motion for adjournment.
I'll
Motion
move
by
to
John
adjourn.
Kelly, seconded by Maggie.
I'll
Roll
get
call,
you, I'll
please.
get you a new one of these, but if we can get Bill and you to sign that one, I can take it certified. That one will be all.
What is the date of the planning commission meeting?
Four.
I can look it up.
No,
Thought maybe
it's-
you knew it off the top of your head.
I did earlier,
Is it the 13th?
yes,
I won't be here anyway.
13th.
All right, thank you.
Okay. By acclamation, we're adjourned.
Right, David, right? 13th?
Yeah.
Planning commission is the 13th?